Hello there, everybody. It's time to do some fashion framing. Yeah, time to do some fashion framing. Alright, my name is Big Spoon, one of the instructors here on the Elucium Academy lore channel, but we're not all lore all the time. Sometimes we do some fashion framing. And so today we're going to talk about a style of fashion framing that I am quite fond of, that I think adds a lot of depth and enjoyability for specifically, seasoned players, late game players, and is, I think, kind of unique. It's fashion framing based on, number one, just like one color palette, and number two, sort of based on an inspiration of that comes from within the game. So some art design that comes within the game that is also a little bit congruent with lore. For me, whenever I'm fashion framing, I don't really enjoy to just pick the things that just like generally, oh, this looks really cool, oh, this really looks awesome. I mean, I do that for a lot of my fashion frames, but I find that a lot of times what looks cool and what looks awesome kind of don't capture a new sort of feeling on a different frame, and I just fall into liking the same sorts of armor pieces, liking the same sorts of colors. And so what I wanted to do today was sort of give some insight into how I keep my fashion framings interesting and evolving and not stagnant by sort of motivating them by being, in some way related to the lore of the specific Warframe, and also giving myself some restraints for the color palette so that I'm not overwhelmed by color palette options. And so today we're going to be using XAKU as an example, because I think XAKU lends themselves to some very interesting fashion framing ideas. One of the things that we notice about XAKU that's not typically the case for lots of other Warframes is that their body is relatively asymmetric. And typically, in the world of fashion framing, one of the sort of base level fashion framing trends, I guess you could say, is to make things symmetrical. And in fact, there are a lot of armor, well, not a lot, but there are some armor sets that are like intrinsically asymmetric, like the Dindra, that normally wouldn't have a great home on a lot of other more typical fashion frames, but XAKU provides a very interesting chance to get a little creative with our fashion frames. And so, what we know about XAKU is that XAKU were born in the void. Oh, is there no void? I can't just search Codex for void-related information? Come on, DE. What's going on there? Or maybe if I tab over to Universe, that would be easier. I'm not sure if XAKU has Laverian. No, XAKU does not. Alright, let's look at the art gallery a little bit. So in the art gallery for... I bet you we're not going to find XAKU in here, but we probably will find some void information in locales, methinks. What we're doing right now is we're looking at concept art, and we're looking at concept art because we want to gain some color inspiration. Like this particular bit of concept art actually gave me my inspiration for my sort of Spyro, like Yokai Oberon Prime fashion frame. This like very soft orange beige, along with very soft sort of half blue, half lavender, really plays nicely, I think, with Oberon as a healer and a spreader of sort of confusion and chaos. I like warm colors with them. But when we're looking for some color palette inspirations, there's nothing wrong with looking at some of the gorgeous artwork that is done by the people who make this game. And so because with XAKU we want to make our fashion frame void themed today, what I'm going to look for is some locale concept design for void space. And there might not be concept design for void space. I'm not sure what point in the development of this game void space became, an important part of the world. But I'm sure that there is some sort of artwork that we can find of void information. Okay, so it wasn't in locales. Probably won't be an infestation, though it could be. I don't know what fire tempest means. It's interesting. Oh. That's pretty cool. I don't even know what this is. User submission contest winner. Cool. Are these just like Captura scenes? Interesting. I'm getting a little sidetracked here, I admit, but we will find. We'll look into that later. Alright, so let's look a little bit at, let's see here. Not gear and equipment, not weaponry. We want more like items. Let's check through some fan art. Oh, there's a lot of fan art. Probably mostly Warframes. What we want really is world design for the Void. So maybe we're not going to find that in art gallery. Maybe we'll find that in fragments. I sure have some Void fragments, don't I? Yes, good. There it is.
So I have pulled the plugs, and the Dax see and know. My heart surges, but I control it. A racing heart only shortens the fuse. The bone plugs in hand, I kick from the floor, red ribbons unfurling behind me as I take flight. After this, finally, the dream will end.
Some Orden Karis dialogue there. Pixel hunting, pixel hunting. Anyway, I'm really just here to look at these colors. So this is an interesting sort of Void color palette. One thing about the Void that's definitely present is luxurious, you know, whites and golds, along with some like more sullen browns and bronzes, along with the sort of yellow kind of light that we get from the Void, which is not so much like a yellow or like a ghost. It's kind of like a very, very light ghostly green. And I feel like it's a mixture of this like blue glow and gold glow that gives us this sort of tint of green, because that's what you get when you mix blue and gold. But a very, very pale blue and gold that end up making a really, really light green color, sort of a jade light color, if you get my meaning here, and this is where the lore sort of comes into it, but sort of a jade light color for the Void. And so that's what I'm going to try to capture with XAKU, because XAKU has this awesome skeletal framework that they can erupt into for their fourth ability, as we know if we've played XAKU. And because XAKU looks sort of like an artifact, you know, a piecing together of three individuals, it lends itself to sort of Void artifact. And well, we know actually what Void artifacts look like in general, and in fact, we have some Void artifacts right here in our inventory. They're called Ayatan Sculptures, right? So today's fashion frame, we're going to draw inspiration, right? Our concept for the fashion frame is going to come from Ayatan Sculptures. So let's take a look at some of these beauties, and let's just notice some of the things about them. So right off the bat, I could, if I wanted, incorporate sort of an orange and a blue to recall the Ayatan star part of Ayatan Sculpture, but I don't really want to do that because I really only want to use one color palette. So if I am going to get close to an orange tint, it's really just going to be a very bright gold. But definitely the colors that we're seeing here can all be found on the Orokin color palette. It's not a coincidence. This is an Orokin treasure. And as we know, the Orokin did most of their treasure crafting within the Void, which is where XAKU themselves was compiled. So we see blues, and we also see dark blue and light blue fading a little bit into each other. In fact, we see that a lot of the stems of these colors are this sort of dark blue. You see at the bottom of these mandibles, I guess you'd say, and also on their joints, and also at the base, we see very faintly this sort of darker, almost Deva kind of blue. If you're familiar with a lot of Hindu paintings of various gods and goddesses and deities, a lot of them are depicted with blue skin. I believe those are called Deva. I could be misremembering that or botching it. I'm not an expert in Hindu mythology, although I seek to become one eventually. But we see like a very dark blue fading into that light one. So that's what we're going to remember for sort of the energy, the glow of the Ayatan sculpture. Isn't just a blue, it's a blending of two specific blues, one being very dark and rich, the other being very bright and popping. So next, we also see that we have a lot of artifice here. You know, we have our whites, we have our golds, those are very straightforward. Then we also have some gray, if we want, or beige, I often prefer. I find with grays, you can really just use beiges with grays, and it gives the same sort of feel, only one is warmer and one's a little bit colder. Let's take a look at the Orta. Again, we're seeing the same principles at work here. This one has some black present in it as well, though. Same thing here. And really, it could just be that the black is just a very dark rendition of the gray. But the other thing that we notice is that not all Ayatan sculptures are symmetric, right? The Ayatan Anasa is, and I don't have all of them here. I just have 4 because I just did an arbitration, and these are the ones that I got. But the Valana isn't always symmetric as it shifts around. The Piv is asymmetric even at its base, right? The Orta is symmetric, but doesn't necessarily move symmetrically. But all of them have this theme in common of a sort of floating golden artifact in perpetual motion. So these are the sorts of concepts that we want to capture when we begin our XAKU fashion frame today. So without further ado, let's move over to that. Now I do have sort of a... Oh, don't look at that yet. Don't look at that. Don't look at that. Don't look at any of this yet. We have sort of a cooking show before after, so don't worry. We will be flipping between... Oh, I'm going to give you a little preview. That and this. But I wanted to sort of demonstrate the process by which I got to this, and even this model doesn't incorporate the full grandness of Ayatan XAKU. So Ayatan XAKU, if you wanted to, I think you could use this helmet. You could definitely justify it with this little nodule up top and the top button. Could even recall like an Ayatan star kind of thing going on up there. But personally, I don't really feel that this sort of helmet I need to buy for the fashion frame, so I'm not going to. I'm just going to keep with the base regular XAKU stuff. Plus, who knows what XAKU Deluxe skins will look like? And I don't like buying too much stuff until Deluxe skins or Tenojin for the Warframe starts coming out. Something I always do when I fashion frame is put on that Titania Noble set. I find this gives me the best vantage on the frame as a whole. I don't really recommend, like this is definitely a part of fashion framing. It's not something I usually like spend for, but Titania Noble is something that I will almost always purchase. So we are going to work within one color palette, like I mentioned before, and that color palette is none other than Orokin. What other color palette is there if you're designing a void frame, after all? And we know that Orokin, and specifically we're going after Ayatan Sculptures, are going to use our whites, our beiges or our grays, depending on which we prefer, our golds, our yellows if we want to try to capture that amber Ayatan star, and our light blues and our dark blues for the energy colors. But we have to assign those colors, and of course, the sort of concept I'm going for here is that the XAKU themselves is sort of this, human, or biological component of what an Ayatan sculpture is. And if we know, if we think back to some lore stuff that we already know about Ayatan sculptures, we know that they can, and perhaps always do, contain memory, some sort of conscious memory that is, I guess, stored during continuity ceremonies, or somehow preserved when people are executed, or when people decide to pass away in Orokin culture. Maybe they don't want continuity for whatever reason. I don't know. But we know that there are memories contained within Ayatan sculptures. So the concept I'm going for here is that XAKU is this sort of 3 memories merged into this big, ambulatory you know, battle-ready Ayatan sculpture. And so if that's the case, then our base color, because most of the color of an Ayatan sculpture is going to be a white, we have to choose which white we want. Honestly, it doesn't matter. The lights of my like arsenal section are too bright anyway that you won't really get a feel for these colors until you're moving around in the different tile sets anyway. But I usually like to start on an extreme, so I'll start at one of the poles of the color. You know, top left, top right, bottom left, bottom right, and then sometimes middle. Most often I'll just start here, because this looks like the brightest to me. And secondary color. So again, we're just in the Oregon palette today. So, this is actually a small part of fashion framing that I absolutely love, and it's the discussion of like what texture gold are you going for? Because like we all know what like metallic gold looks like, but does this hit it better? Or does this hit it better? Or does this hit it better? Or does this hit it better? But I usually like to start at the top left, because I find that this is like the truest sort of actual gold that you would use in crafting. It's not too shiny. It's but it does have, you know, a sheen to it. It's not like something like this that could be mistaken for yellow in the wrong lights. This gold is not about looking pretty necessarily. This gold is about preserving memory. You know, like you use gold on a microchip, right? Sort of Ayatan memory preserving sort of concept here. So we're going to stick with gold here. Tertiary. So this one wants to accent the white, kind of like we saw the gray doing in the Ayatan sculpture. So if we wanted, we could use gray here. However, in the Ayatan sculpture, all of the gray that we get sort of is very small outlines of gray. It's almost very not even noticeable as gray itself, because it could just be the indentation of the construction that is the Ayatan sculpture. And so because this gray does occupy, like it occupies that right booty cheek, and it occupies a lot of surface area on this frame and characterizes the asymmetry, I like to go with something that's a little bit warmer. You know, something that looks like it's chitinous almost, that it's constructive and living rather than sort of metallic and rocky. And so with this one, I simply choose this top left-hand beige, because in the light it can still be caught off as white, but if you look more closely you can see that it's almost a more chitinous beige, which I quite like. And our accents, let's see what our accents inform. Now, one of the temptations here would be to have the accents also catch the energy color. But I think that that's a mistake here. And the reason I say that is because XAKU has this emissive quality that makes them very, very interesting to fashion frame, because a lot of what you'll see of the actual body wireframe or outline is this emissive quality. So we kind of get an extra color palette because the emissive quality of XAKU exists in this wireframe capability, right? Wireframe instead of Warframe, but you know what I mean. So we're going to resist the temptation to apply our sort of blue. We could even try like a dark blue accents and then light blue for the energy. That's something I haven't tried. I might try that out and see how it looks. That could be an interesting thing to do, but what I'm going to start with here is I'm going to preserve this gold, because gold is a pretty significant part of these Ayatan sculptures, and this amount of gold just doesn't feel like enough gold to me. There's a lot of gold surface area on an Ayatan sculpture, and I want to preserve that. I don't want to muddy my colors with a different shade of gold. If I do use a different shade of gold, I want it to be related to the original shade of gold. So instead of this one, you might use this one and just say, okay, this one's less worn and shinier. So I'm going to use this one, or the one right below it, like this one's a little less dull. And creates a little bit of dynamicism, but I wouldn't move too far away from the original gold, so I'm going to use just the same one there. Especially because when we apply that to cyandanas and attachments, it can get a little bit weird. And so for our emissive, we first want to figure out which side of the emissive is the more dominant one here. Usually it's weirdly the second side, so I'm going to put the darker blue here in that emissive slot, and we're going to try a lighter blue. We'll actually go down here for that, for the second emissive slot. Oh, and it looks like I was mistaken about this, the wireframe. That's actually an energy consideration, but that's fine. It still amounts to the same thing. It's just energy instead of emissive. So for the emissive, we're going to, it's not going to matter as much because the emissive is relatively less surface area that's going to be seen. So we're just going to make the emissive like that. Easy. We could even, if we wanted, Well, the emissive is going to change a lot how we look when we battle, so we should save that. And I think I'm going to reverse these, actually. I think we're going to go with this, and then this. And this preserves that dark blue that faded into light blue that we saw in the glowing parts of the Ayatan sculpture. So for our energy type, that's what's actually going to influence our wireframe details here. And so I will say that because the energy color is important to this fashion frame, it's important that you do forma your XAKU once. There are players out there that might not know about that. That was a fun little surprise when I discovered it in game, is that once you have gotten your Warframe to level 30 and applied a forma to it, so to reset or change or add a polarity to one of the slots on your Warframe's mod loadout, you then reset your Warframe to rank 0 and then level it back up. But as soon as you form it, you actually unlock the second energy texture for your Warframe. And with some Warframes, that can be more influential in a fashion frame than others. Because XAKU has so much of their body expressed with this sort of wireframe of void tendril, of like auriform tendril that makes up the body of XAKU. That just means that XAKU is a Warframe that you just want to forma at least once to get the full fashion frame effect out of it, right? And usually you're going to want to forma any Warframe once if you truly want to maximize fashion framing capabilities. So here we're going to go for the sort of jade light that I talked about of the void, where we have a very light blue interacting with a very brilliant yellow to create a pale green. So it looks like our secondary color here is the more dominant one. Ooh, and actually it could be that what we really want is the blue overlay here. But we're going to try something out. So we're going to start with blue. And the primary color, we're going to shift to a brilliant yellow. There we go, and that's that sort of pale green shade that I was talking about, where yes, it's a light blue and a brilliant yellow combined, but together they make sort of a lemon lime Sprite kind of, you know, delicious, refreshing zest. But you know, a pale, almost greenish sort of void energy is what we're going for in those tendrils, and this is what really our Ayatan XAKU embodies. Embodies memory being stored in artifice, right? Just like an Ayatan sculpture serves various Orokin purposes. All right, so now we've got our base fashion frame to a place where we're kind of happy with it. And so it's time to go into the attachment section. So in the attachment section, I will admit I was a little bit stumped because so many of the attachments are symmetrical that with XAKU's shoulder plating, it's difficult to find attachments that really preserve how cool they look when they are on asymmetrical shoulder-like placements. And until I remembered that there is a set of armor that is already asymmetrical itself, and that is the Dindra shoulder and the Dindra armor set in general. So the Dindra, and the other cool thing about the Dindra is that the Dindra display holographic tiles. You can see on the left shoulder there of XAKU, there's a very small square holographic tile. It doesn't add a lot to the overall fashion frame, honestly, but it's perfect for XAKU because it's a small square of energy on XAKU's already smaller shoulder. And because this entire armor set is itself asymmetrical, it lends itself to XAKU's asymmetric design. Not only that, it also amplifies this concept of memory and information display, information retention, information animation that's kind of at work in this Ayatan sculpture theme that we're pursuing. And it adds further stuff to hang off of XAKU, again, to recall the sort of perpetual motion and suspension against like the laws of gravity sometimes of these Ayatan sculptures. So we're going to apply our Dindra plates, sort of leaning into the asymmetry of XAKU already, and not trying to keep XAKU clearly defined in one box of like symmetrical beauty, but instead sort of revel in this asymmetrical coordination. But you'll notice that as I put on these attachments, they're just their base color. We haven't swapped yet, and we won't yet, because we need to select a chest. Notably, the Dindra armor set does not come with a chest plate, or at least not one that I could find. So we get to pick our own chest plate here. And there are actually several options, I think, which nicely recall this sort of Forged in the Void animated Ayatan sculpture thing that we're going for. Edo Prime does look very nice because it's, you know, not just like has a really nice gold coloring trim, but also has this sort of electricity that runs through it that can look really nice if you make sure that those colors are starkly different. I also considered the Imbalist chest growth because the Imbalist chest growth sort of gives the idea that, like, it's not just any part of the void that XAKU was raised in, it's, you know, an infected part of the void. And it's like, you know, sort of a demonstration of like infested hive mind kind of evolution plus Orokin sort of technology. So I do really like the Imbalist chest growth. I also enjoy Porta on just about every Warframe. I think Porta just looks great, and Porta Day of the Dead always just looks great. But because I overuse it, I try not to use it on a specific fashion frame like this. And then also the Riv Elite is a very like Ayatan sculpture reminiscent sort of design here. But with the Riv Elite, unless you have really strong shoulder pads, I don't like going with the Riv Elite because it sort of takes up a lot of prominence on the chest. So why don't we just to demonstrate what I mean by the Ayatanness, why don't we just copy the main colors? And in fact here, I don't actually want the attachment energy to mimic the yellow and green. I want the attachment energy to stick with this sort of blue. Because the yellow and green attachment energy, honestly, it can just overpower a lot of the colors that are going on underneath it, because on the Dindra plates you have this holographic display. And that's not something that I want to do. I want to let the colors underneath sort of shine, you know? So we're going to keep this as sort of the dark blue, light blue. We might even, yeah, I think that looks nice. But you see what I mean about the Riv? Is the Riv just sort of takes a lot of prominence when it's the only part of its armor set, and you know, sort of makes the chest seem froofed out a bit. So instead, let's take a look at our other options. I also considered this one because Ayatan sculptures are perpetually in motion, and this is a chest plate that's perpetually in motion. But honestly, the shape of it just doesn't do it for me. This one's interesting. This is the one from the Neza accessories, and I actually kind of like this one. Oh, wow. I hadn't actually seen this one yet. The one that I ended up going with was actually one that's more understated, the Edo Prime, as just sort of like, to almost look like little things that have been socketed in to XAKU, and also just not to draw a lot of attention from XAKU's other parts of XAKU's design here. So really, there are a lot of good options. Edo Prime chest plate, Imbalist chest growth to sort of give that growth in progress sort of feel. You have a Prisma Edo, Rancha Prime, Riv Elite. Those are sort of the options that I see as existing. And I actually really kind of like the Rancha. I might try that out later, but we're going to stick with what I actually built, which is the Edo, the sort of understated chest plate here of the Edo Prime. Or not Edo Prime, Prisma Edo. Finally, for our ephemera, again, sticking with the constant motion theme of the Ayatan sculptures, I want something that's constantly in motion and symmetrical, or at least weighty. So I'm going to go with the Trio ephemera, which you can receive, I think you can purchase its blueprint for relatively few Vitus Essence from the Arbiters of Hexus once you're able to compete in arbitrations, which unlocks when you've completed all of the star maps. So great in-game sort of fashion frame to work on here. Excuse me, I had to take a bite of sandwich. Alright, so our attachments are looking pretty good. But as any good fashion framer knows, a good fashion frame lives or dies on its Sayandana. And this is why the free-to-play model of Warframe is so successful, because fashion framing is just so much fun. So usually with this, I like to just like scroll through and see what we have available, but because we're going for this sort of Ayatan Sculpture thing, there are a couple things I'm looking for. Cyandanas with a powerful energy and good metallics, like the Deru, and I'm just going to equip the Deru and copy the main colors here. Actually, we're going to copy the attachment colors here. There we go. And remember, we're doing that because we want the energy not to overpower, because with XAKU, when you use XAKU's one ability, a lot of the color that's hiding right now in the fashion frame comes to the forefront, so you don't really want to over pollute the color pool with that specific mixture of jade light or yellow and blue. And so for the attachment colors in the Cyandana, I like to keep it just a blue. You know, we're going to keep it simple. But anyway, the ones that we're going to look for are ones that are unique and have moving parts. Ones that have energy sort of color at their focus, and ones that have really nice metallics at their focus. I considered a Void Demon kind of thing here, but that looked a little too techno to me. The Deru is close, but again, the Deru is one of those things that I use so often that I try not to. And also, I don't like using the Deru on like a slender Warframe. I find that the hump on the back sort of protrudes a little bit too much. Let's continue on. Incubus Ribbon I considered, just because of the very nice metallic texture that it has, and the circular sort of symmetry. But ultimately, I wanted one that's a little bit more powerful than that. Misa Prime, also interesting because you get a very Ayatan feel from it. But again, I find the Misa Prime also wants more of a bulky Warframe to wear. We're going to go through several others before I stop on the one that I eventually chose. This one has a great metallic, but I find again that you want a more prominent figure. So this one was really close. And again, Raiji is one of those that I use quite a lot. So like XAKU is a mixture of several different individuals, just like this Raiji Sayandana gives us the 5 different schools of, you know, focus, and the symbol of the focus trees on the very back. It's in perpetual motion. It's very symmetrical, just like Ayatan Sculptures. However, I use this one quite a lot, and again, I think that this one kind of wants symmetry along the entire Warframe to look perfectly beautiful, I think. And so I thought we could do better with XAKU. Some other options for XAKU. This looked very Ayatan to me, but I found that the wing motif was a little too much for me on XAKU. This one goes really nicely, I think, with XAKU's sort of energy theme. But what I eventually settled on was this, and it's a since Sayandana I've always had my eye on, but I just thought was perfect because it hits on this concept. These look like 2 ghostly hands. Like, it looks like we're looking at a 4-handed figure here. And I think that that's really cool because, again, XAKU has this multiple personality, you know, 3 people in one kind of backstory. And so, like, I think that anything we can do to give the appearance of, like, more intentionality, more hands present, right? Like, more individuals present in this frame, the better it will feel to play, because we'll know that our fashion framing sort of lines up with the lore framing behind it. So I went with the Mithra Sindana, and it's a Tennogen item, so any money that you spend on the Sindana, like half of it goes to the person who designed it, which is really cool. So we've got our Kick A Sindana, or Sayandana, and we've got our attachments looking pretty good. And it should be that when I flip between these, yep, they look basically identical. So the last thing to do is the funnest thing to do, and that's to design weapons. Now for the primary weapon, I usually just make sure that the primary weapon's invisible, unless it specifically looks really cool when holstered. But usually it's so asymmetric, and they're going to change out so much that it's too much hassle to change every single one. So I just go, you know, not visible when holstered. But I will match the colors. Now here is where we can start playing around with our accessories. Now, for the secondary, and let's face it, secondaries aren't always super necessary. You can play around a little bit with your secondaries. And the thing that I loved about this secondary, and I actually got to this after I designed the melee weapon, But the thing that I love about the Oxamati Prime is that you have this sort of beautiful flower face on it, while also this very distinct ammo carrier, this very distinct clip that we can attach into it. And because it's symmetrical and beautiful and shades really nicely in the sort of Orican, like void kind of color space that we're working in, this is the one that I choose. Also, it adds a lot of weight, and it's the curvature of the magazines draws eyes to this to the Mithra Syandana as well. I thought that this just worked perfectly. It gives XAKU some more of that bulk that the frame is kind of missing, while also keeping in mind this sort of symmetric Ayatan sculpture construction kind of piecework idea that we're going on when we're thinking about this particular XAKU fashion frame. But as all of us know, making that melee weapon look really cool is much easier when you use, some sort of tonfa. And so if you buy the bundle that gives you, I think, the Magnuma skin, it's like that deluxe bundle, you also unlock this tonfa skin, which is called the Maruta tonfa skin. It doesn't really matter what tonfas you use. I'm using the Boltace, but that's just because my Oma are designed in a very different way, and I use my Oma on someone else. But the thing that I love about this Maruta tonfa skin is that already tonfas look the coolest when holstered. And you'll see that I've changed the holster style on this one so that it arches a little bit. And you see how earlier when I was considering the Raiji Syandana, right, I was like, oh, I really love the feel of this Raiji Syandana, but I use it so much, and it really does want like a more symmetrical Warframe because it's not itself very bulky. Well, you see how when you choose like a Syandana like the Mithra, yeah, it might be a little bit more understated than the Raiji, but if you then reposition your holster like positioning of a good melee weapon, like a set of tonfas, you can do some incredible stuff that's basically like a Raiji kind of thing going on back there. They have like basically like a sort of puppet thing going on that recalls the sort of blues and glowing blues and golds and whites of Orokin sculpture and Ayatan sculpture specifically. So you'll see that I also have layered because really we want to use every part of the buffalo here, right? And part of that fashion frame buffalo is the Sugatra. I think far and away the Thanatos Sugatra, if you only ever buy one Sugatra, make it the Thanatos, because it just looks so good. Not only does it have the energy trails there at the bottom, it's got a really nice metal, sharp, pointy, kind of like almost like crucifix design there. Not a huge fan of the Necros Thanatos skin, or Kala skin, which the Thanatos comes as a part of the bundle in. Although I have bought that and built it a certain way. But if you're going to buy a Sugatra, buy the Thanatos Sugatra. It looks really nice. Now on this one I haven't formed the weapon, so there's only one energy color, but I kind of like that, because here's the interesting thing that we're doing with the Thanatos Sugatra. So you see how my Mithra Syandana, unlike the inside of my XAKU, like my XAKU's Tindril energy, is actually a mixture of light blue and bright gold. But the Mithra Syandana energy, as well as my attachment energy and my emissive energy on XAKU themselves, is actually just a light blue and a dark blue. So what I want to do, in order to not overpower the natural light blue and yellow mixture that the Tindrils are getting in XAKU, while also wanting to evoke that a little bit, is I'm going to go for pure gold. And in this, it's really just about picking the gold energy that you like that looks roughly yellow. It could be a stronger gold if you want, but I find that stronger golds can kind of overpower as energy colors. But if I wanted to go with like a stronger gold for the Thanatos Sugatra itself, that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. But the cool thing about this is that when I let the weapons rest, the way that I have, and this informed how I repositioned how my tonfas were holstered, because they don't come like this standard, of course. But you'll see now that my Thanatos Sugatra, its energy hangs down at roughly the same level as my Mithra Syandana. And just like my Tindrils are doing here, where they're mixing a light blue and a gold, this Sugatra is mixing its gold with the light blue that's being mixed under it in the Mithra Cyandana, allowing me not to overpower the natural, very pretty and understated mixture of those colors in the XAKU's frame itself, while also drawing more attention to how nicely that color palette plays alongside each other. And this is actually what informed how I positioned my tonfas. Now, for anyone who doesn't know, and I don't understand why more people don't do this. I think I've seen maybe 1 or 2 YouTubers, and I can't remember their names, I'm sorry, but I've seen 1 or 2 YouTubers talk about this, but no one talks about this, and it's holster style. If you don't like the way that a melee weapon sits, go and change its holster style. You can do a lot, and because the default holster style for tonfas is usually just like a very symmetrical, like couple of horns protruding. You'll see people with their Cronin Prime or their Oma. You know, people incorporate this into FashionFrame all the time with tonfas. But the cool thing, I think, is to go into this holster style and then affect the Z offset, Y offset, you know, the pitch, the rotation, the yaw. It's going to be hard to tell what these are, but let me make it simple for you. So this one, like the default setting, all of these sliders are in the middle, right? Easy peasy. Default setting, all these are in the middle. So you see what I've done is on this one I've just put them much higher on the body, whereas they would normally be lower on the y-axis. I just maxed it, right, to keep it simple, so I don't have to try to exactly hit. I can just match them. So maxed on the y-axis, same place X and Z as start. And then this one, again, remember that they start here in the middle, so we maxed pitch on the y-axis, or maxed pitch. So like, this is what pitch is, right? And usually they start, for Warframe, they start around here, and they're symmetrical. So I just maxed the pitch here, right? Left the yaw where it was, maxed the roll. And this is what roll is, sort of like the angle that it lays at. Max that out too. And notice that what I've created doesn't even really look like 2 tonfas anymore. It looks like one very strange pair of scissors or something like that, where you put like your finger through here and your finger through here and it doesn't cut because there's this stupid thing right here in the middle. Like the handles no longer look like handles, they overlay and become part of the same structure. And that's fine. These don't have to be melee weapons when they are on your character's back. They can just be cool looking sculptures, and since we're already going for this very interesting looking Ayatan sculpture kind of route, I found that this skin with the tonfas just really captured that perfectly. And the cool thing about this is as you jump around, and I only noticed this because I went to Captura, but as you jump around and like do your different like attack moves and combos, these little pieces of gold semicircle here aren't actually connected to anything. They spin around and twirl, much like you would see on an Ayatan sculpture. So that's our tonfa holster style. Paragon, or Parazon doesn't really matter. I do just, you know, hit copy. And boom. We've got ourselves an Ayatan XAKU. And that's just to show you this is the before and the after, and now they've finally matched up. I use the Amprex because I think that it's nice to be able to shoot like void energy lightning. Oxymati Prime is just a fashion thing. I think it looks really pretty. And again, the Boltace is just a fashion thing. But feel free to build around that. You know, if this Boltace you're just using for fashion, do something weird with it that you normally wouldn't. Like, you know, I've got this one upgraded to maximize my like slam attack. Just thought like it'd be really cool to create shockwaves of slams and to be using my Boltace a lot. And so, you know, I've got like Killing Blow and Seismic Wave. I'm not sure if it makes sense to have Condition Overload and Killing Blow on at the same time. I'm not sure if that works like Pressure Point. It might. I haven't looked into it. But, you know, nothing too crazy here. I've just got, in fact, let's just swap these up so that all of them are on the bottom row here. You know, I've just got my Seismic Wave, my Life Strike, and my Killing Blow. And these are all the specific things to heavy attacks and specifically slam attacks. Thought it might be fun to do some slam attacks with XAKU. So here we are with our Ayatan XAKU. And let's get some gameplay just to get a feel for it. We'll go to Hydron. The very rare solo Hydron. Not often you see that. Gotta see how we look when we land from our ship, after all. Yeah.
Our position has been compromised.
Let's go ahead and activate our Zata's Whisper to sort of see how that color becomes stronger. And you see now I didn't want to overpower that color. As I started mirroring the color mixture
detecting glass
on both
it's close.
On both the energy and the emissive color, but when I activated Zata's Whisper, I thought, oh wow, you know, that really does overpower it, and it kind of just looks like a blur of yellow and blue. I want to preserve some of that separate yellow and separate blue, so that's why we have all of our attachments and our Cyandana and our circling stars as primarily blue, and our slam damage as primarily gold, so that we still have those primary colors present. Let's take a look at the mixture of energy color for some of the moves now. Spoiler alert.
Where are they coming
So that
from?
Amprex mixed energy looks great. Void lightning. Let's use some AQs, huh? Let's get some allies. They're now in my Void Haze.
You gotta find out what's protecting them, and then take your shot.
That's right, fight my allies, but I'm also going to kill you, just to demonstrate. Power of the Void, the Ayatan Void. Now losing some health, better do some powerful melee moves. Let's take a look at that Aximati. And why don't we capture someone in a gaze real quick, huh? Because we've still got to see a couple other energy textures. Here we have our Grasp of Look energy texture. And why don't we try our Vast Untime? Oh, I hope there's still time.
Transference still holding.
Get somebody in a grasp and use some Vast Untime. Boom, and here we are in the Vast Untime. And we're going to Zata's Whisper it up. So now we see how really beautiful that sort of greenish mixture that we achieve through the mixture of the light blue and the brilliant gold can be. Get that Oxybody out so that we can see a little bit of action with our melee weapons on our back. Looks nice, right? Oh, just feeling like the power of the Void itself. Alright, y'all, and that has been Ayatan XAKU. Thank you for watching. Please hit the like and subscribe if you enjoyed it. We do a lot of lore content, but we do a lot of Fashion Frame here as well. Have a good one, y'all.